Good morning, Santa Clarita. You are listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I am Wade Skalsky, your host of Wade Beyond The Courtroom, and I am excited to talk to you today. Mike, how are you joining me on the board today?
Good morning, Wade. How about those Patriots, huh?
I am basking in my first successful sports prediction ever.
Did you clean up all the potato chips you filled on the floor and you?
Exactly. There were chips everywhere in my house. I was extremely excited. So I'm now batting 1,000 for my sports predictions.
It was just luck. It was just luck on that last one.
Typically, if you know me, I don't gamble, and I'm a horrible sports picker. So that was an aberration, and we may stop there so I can stay batting 1,000.
So Jake's got a long drive to Santa Clarita.
He does. He actually he's a man of his word. He told me he is going to actually make good on his bet, and we are scheduling a extremely expensive lunch at a fine establishment locally. So I'm excited about that.
Good. Well, good morning.
Good morning to you. And so very excited to talk to you today. We've got a guest in studio that we're going to get to in a little bit. I am Wade Skalsky. I am an attorney. I am a elementary student in the human condition, if you will, trying to graduate to get a little bit, maybe to a graduate level. I have Mike with me, and joining me today is attorney Dan Melnick. Now, to give you a little background on Dan and how I know Dan, he is is it fair to say you were a very experienced attorney, Dan? Is that a kind way of saying you've been doing it for a while?
Yeah, a little while.
Right.
Longer than I care to mention.
That's right. That's right. And Dan actually is, I very lovingly refer to him as my legal mentor. So he is a very wise man. He helps me when I have questions about things. And I think it's important to know that, as lawyers, you're also gaining the strategic partnerships that lawyers have. It's not that we know everything or that we can find everything out. We also have relationships that we can rely on. Sometimes that's investigators. Sometimes that is another lawyer like Dan. And we all collaborate and basically effectively try to figure out the best way to go forward. So Dan, I want to learn a little bit more about you. So you are a native of Californian, right?
Yeah, I was born in Santa Monica, grew up in the San Fernando Valley, went to Van Nuys Junior High, Van Nuys High.
And you actually lived in Santa Clarita for a while.
I did, for about a year and a half, 2 years.
So you've kind of been around, you've experienced all the areas of Los Angeles.
I have, and of course with what we do for a living, I drive all over Los Angeles, all over Southern California.
It's wherever the cases take you.
That's it.
That's right. Now, Dan, why did you decide to become a lawyer? How did that happen exactly?
Well, when I was in college, law looked like a good direction to go, although I didn't plan on practicing criminal law. And then one day, another attorney I know asked me if I'd like to try a case. And I went and tried it, and I decided this is what I want to do.
Oh, what kind of case was it that you tried?
That was a false arrest and abuse of a police officer case.
And then so once you were in the courtroom and did a trial and all of that, you were hooked.
I was. I really enjoyed the trial experience and the arguing to a jury. I got that Perry Mason thing going. And,
I find this fascinating. I know that you have sort of a little bit of an entertainment background in your life. You had some experiences growing up because of, I think your father did something with entertainment, correct?
Yeah, my dad was an agent for 40-some-odd years.
Right, and he had some pretty heavy hitters that were some of his people.
He did. He had some big stars. I don't know if I can name names, but he had Kim Novak was one of his people that started out with him. Over the years, he had Charlton Heston, Jimmy Stewart, Shirley MacLaine. My dad represented a lot of biggies in Hollywood.
Not only can you name names, it is encouraged in here to name drop. So we try to do that a lot. So yeah, no, I find that fascinating. So not only did you get to sort of experience being a lawyer in the courtroom and pounding on the table, but you also got to experience some of that with people in the film.
I did. In fact, something that I learned just recently, a friend of mine emailed me a copy of a page from Barbara Eden's book, and I found out that my dad was the one that actually gave her the name Barbara Eden.
Really?
Yeah, I did not know that until very recently.
That's one great advantage of living in Los Angeles and just having the entertainment industry all around you is that you get to sometimes come across little pieces of history like that. That must have been so interesting for you to grow up in that.
I got a question. Why is it important for celebrities to have an attorney to be represented?
Well,
because you have an agent,
right,
and a manager.
Well, there are contracts involved, and so anytime that there's a contract involved and there are two parties, basically, you want to make sure that your interests are taken care of, and so you want to make sure that you just don't let the other guy write the contract for you and be like, it's okay, we'll take care of that,
gotcha.
Right? And that's the same thing with the kind of work that Dan and I do. Is as defense attorneys, we make sure that our clients' interests are taken care of because in the courtroom, there's the judge, there's the prosecutor, and then of course there's us with the defendant, and all three of those people have different interests. They have different things they're trying to accomplish. So now, Dan, let's talk a little bit about. Now, when you were a lawyer, you've been practicing for how long now?
35 years.
35 years. And has the law changed, or in terms of the practice of criminal law changed from in the last 35 years in your experience?
Oh, yeah. Well, as you know, every year they pass new laws, and there's things today that are crimes were not crimes when I started.
So actually, in terms of the types of cases that you do now are much different than maybe the types of cases you did originally.
Just more.
Right.
More things that people can get in trouble for.
Right.
Domestic violence is a great example. Domestic violence, as it's defined today, would not have been a crime when I started.
The things like that are very interesting, and that's why it's so important that we have to keep on top of those things, changes in the law. When we come back, we're going to go on break here in a second. When we come back, we're going to talk about maybe some of the misperceptions that we have about when things go to court, different types of cases. And I'm here with attorney Dan Melnick, and I'm attorney Wade Skalsky. You're listening to KHTS AM 1220, Wade Beyond the Courtroom. Welcome back, Santa Clarita. You're listening to your hometown station, AM 1220, KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom. I'm joined in studio today by attorney Dan Melnick. Dan, you did not, it's a running joke, you did not try to escape during the break?
No, I'm still here.
The door is locked, as my wife found out.
Well, escape is a crime. So.
That's right. That's right. So before we talk a little law, there's another interesting fact that I think it's fascinating, and I'm very envious of you. Now, you actually put a pause on the practice of law. You bought a sailboat, and you sailed around the world for some time.
Well, not around the world. We sailed out of Los Angeles down to Cabo and then to the Sea of Cortez. Spent about a year and a half there, and then on down to Costa Rica, where we spent about 8 or 9 months.
Well, I'm not as impressed now that you only went to those places on a boat for about 2.5 years. It sounds much less impressive. And I'm joking, of course, because I don't think I could sail perhaps to Long Beach and back without having a fear of the water.
Yeah, it was really sad and miserable. Just
What kind of
sailing
sailboat?
around.
I'm sure it was, yeah.
What kind of sailboat?
I have it's an Irwin 52. It's a ketch.
Okay.
It's a very unique boat because it's the only Irwin 52 that it's a 2-cabin model, so it has 2 master staterooms.
Nice.
Very, very comfortable. And it's air conditioned, and we have a water maker. I even have a big flat panel TV in it. So
Now, for people that may not be that familiar with sailboats, typically boats themselves are size is always at a premium, of
Right.
course. And so a room in a sailboat, you're not thinking of like, oh, a room at my house. They're actually pretty small. But on your boat with the 2 staterooms, my wife and I have been on Dan's boat. It's beautiful. You have a beautiful...
it's a super comfortable boat.
You got
It
autopilot
was-
and everything?
Oh, yeah.
Wind vane, yeah.
I could set the autopilot and never touch it and go all the way to Hawaii.
There you
or
go.
Anywhere you want.
That's just amazing. Now, did you have any funny? Obviously, I'm sure you have many, many stories. But is there one story that stands out that when you were on your sailing trip?
Well, I'll tell you a funny one. We were pulling into we had just sailed through a storm actually that blew us back 50 miles from where we were going, and we had just anchored in this little bay just outside of Puerto Vallarta. And I'm down below, and all of a sudden Michelle starts shouting to me, Dan, we're on the reef, we're on the reef. So I came running up, and it was a whale right alongside our boat. It looked to her like rocks because they're barnacle-y, and it just caught her by surprise. So I'm like, that's not a reef, that's a whale.
That's something you probably didn't think that you were going to say that day when you woke up.
No, it was, we saw a lot of whales, but not that close to the boat.
Well, no, I think that's not a reef, that's a whale statement probably has not been uttered very often by very many people.
Well, I don't know, because whales are pretty big.
That's
so.
right. That's right. No, I just think that's fascinating. And I often use the sailing analogy with my clients where I tell them at the beginning of a case that, look, we're going to start at point A, we're going to go to point B, but there's going to maybe a storm along the way, the winds may blow us, there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, but the whole goal is to get to the end of the process. And I think that sailing analogy is very helpful for people to understand that. And you actually can kind of have your own stories.
I use an analogy also. I also tell them that I'm the captain of this ship. If you hire me, I'm running the case. The client always gets to make the decision, but I'm the one that's steering the boat and telling them which direction they ought to go. If they decide to go off course, that's up to them.
No, and that's a really good segue into our topic for today, and that's some common misperceptions that people have. Because if you don't manage expectations for your clients so that they understand what's really going to happen, sometimes they'll base their view and perception of what's going to happen on what they see on TV. Now, Dan, do you think that TV is accurate or inaccurate for our profession?
It's inaccurate.
Right,
There's
right.
no 2 ways about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't watch TV in terms of legal shows on TV. Just like I don't think doctors go home and watch a doctor show because I do that all day long. What are some of the common or misperceptions that you've experienced with people that they bring from TV sometimes?
I think the one I hear the most is they didn't read me my rights.
Okay.
I hear that all the time. time. And as you know, there are only specific situations where reading a person's rights has any impact on the outcome of the case. But people believe that if they're not read their rights, they're automatically going to get their case dismissed, and that's not the law.
And I would say there's a really high percentage of people that come to me that we have to walk them through that process. Another one that's good is in terms of the whole issue of people getting off on technicalities. In your experience, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing it for a long time. In your experience, how often does that happen?
I think the statistic is something like 2% of the time. That the most common technicality that people get off for is what's called a 1538 motion, a motion to suppress evidence. Those motions are very, very rarely successful. We do file them when they make sense, and they do get granted from time to time, but it's not as you see on TV where some serial killer goes in and says, you didn't give me my rights, or you didn't tell me something, and they get to walk out of the courtroom. That just doesn't happen like in the movies.
Well, and that's my experience as well. I think a lot of times when we have really big successes on cases, it's more on the investigation side, where we investigate the facts in terms of we present to the prosecutor, hey, look, I know you guys have a perception that these facts are occurring, but our investigator has uncovered these facts, and that's how you get cases kicked a lot of the time. Because I think you're very right, is that it's the technicality issues, the legal technicalities, although there's a reason why they're rare, and that's because judges, frankly, there's some political pressure on judges not to grant them, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. There's political pressure. There's pressure from the district attorney's office. There's pressure from the police agencies, and there's also the law. The law is slanted against dismissing cases on technicalities. So you put all those things together, you really have to have a clean violation before the judge is going to dismiss. He's not even going to dismiss the case. The judge is going to eliminate the evidence, and then the DA can't go forward, so the case gets dismissed. So the judge doesn't even dismiss the case at that point.
Yeah, and a lot of that happens too. When we do jury selection, I think we have to battle sometimes, though, that there can be misperceptions that actually can help our side, basically, and it's interesting that the prosecution has to work against. I know that the prosecution always has to work against the CSI problems, where everyone thinks that all these cases that are done, they are all going to have DNA evidence, they're all going to have satellite imagery and complicated statistical analysis, and the common day practice of law in terms of criminal law just doesn't support that. It'd be horrifically expensive and incredibly time consuming. And so, is that an experience that you've had as well, Dan?
Yeah, I think jurors look for those things much more than they used to because of television, as we said earlier, and that has been my experience. But it goes both ways. They also have preconceptions about if someone got arrested, they must have done something wrong. And I find that jurors tend to lean towards conviction much more than people realize. Even though there's a presumption of innocence, it's not that strong.
Right. No, and all of those things come into play whenever we're, as defense attorneys, dealing with a jury trial, dealing with what we have to battle in those situations. Now, the other thing, too, is that I find really fascinating about Dan as well, is he's a Renaissance man. Dan, there's something else that you do besides being a sailor, captain of the ship, excuse me, a expert criminal defense lawyer. You also kind of know your way around the hockey rink, right?
I've been playing hockey for a few years.
But now, when you say a few years, is that kind of like that I've been eating too much at dinner for a few years?
Well, maybe 55 years.
Yeah, so maybe not that long for me, but yeah. So remind me not to get on a pair of skates with you.
Yeah, well, I'm not quite as quick as I used to be, but I'm still out there playing, and I play every week. I have all my life. Just this last July, I went and played in Spain in an international tournament. I think I was the oldest guy in the tournament, by the way.
Well, listen, I grew up in North Dakota, and basically I have no ability to skate at all, so you would school me in the rink, as they say. So when we come back, we're going to learn a little bit more about what Dan does, and also as well as his hockey prowess. You're listening to Santa Clarita Hometown Station, AM 1220 KHTS. This is Wade Beyond the Courtroom, and I am attorney Wade Skalsky. Welcome back, Santa Clarita. You're listening to your hometown station, AM 1220 KHTS. I am attorney Wade Skalsky, and this is Wade Beyond the Courtroom. Now, Dan, before we go on, I just want to make sure that if people want to get a hold of you, they know how to find you. So what is your website address?
It's melnickdefense.com. It's and also you can get to the same website at thehockeylawyer.com.
Thehockeylawyer.com. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about hockey because you're a Renaissance man, my friend. So
I don't know that they played hockey in the Renaissance.
you know what? They should have. If they didn't,
But how do you tie in hockey and sailing? That's the thing.
I know.
Like in one package. That'd be the.
it's sort of like when you go surfing in the morning and skiing in the afternoon in California. It's like hockey in the morning and sailing at night.
Well, I grew up, as you know, I grew up in the valley here. And when I was 5 years old, they opened the Van Nuys Iceland rink, which is still there. It's right next to the Van Nuys police station. And I was there the day it opened, the grand opening.
Wow.
And that's when I started ice skating. I skated on and off, and then actually in high school is when I started playing hockey more constantly. And so that's how I got into hockey, because it was a place I could go in the hot summer days in the 50s, get out of the heat and get some air conditioning.
That's amazing.
And I remember it was 15 cents for rental skates and a free popcorn or hot chocolate. And that was all it cost to get in there back then.
So you didn't have your own skates. You just rented them.
In the early years, yeah.
That's almost like it's in the old West when they're like it's 2 bits, like 15 cents. That's amazing. Now, actually, and so the hockey league that you play in, is it true? It's actually named after you. Is that true?
Yeah, they named the division after me 15, 20 years ago.
What an honor.
I'm still playing with some of the same guys I've played with since the early 70s. They're in our league.
So, what is your position that you play in hockey?
Are
you the enforcer?
They put me wherever they need me.
Are you the enforcer?
Some weeks I play forward, some weeks I play defense.
I feel like Dan is, when he was talking about being the captain of the ship, he got pretty stern there. Yeah. Are you the captain of the team?
And stern, was that a pun?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Well, I do run the team, but there's plenty of guys that will give me guff if I give them too much instruction.
Now, have you ever taken yourself out of a game for being too tough or being too strong?
Not in recent years. I've mellowed a little bit over the years.
Okay.
In my teen years and probably my college years, I was bigger than the average player when I was in college. So guys looked to me to sort of keep things straight.
Sometimes Dan will look at me and I'm worried that Dan's going to quote bring the pain, if you will. So
drop the gloves. So to speak.
That's right. That's right.
Why the fighting in hockey? When did that all start?
As long as hockey's been around, there's been fighting in hockey.
So how old were you when you started at the hockey rink, you said?
Well, I started skating when I was 5.
Okay. So were you dropping the gloves at 5 years old? Going, Dan Melnick, bring the pain.
Only with my sister.
That's right. That's right. So fantastic. So one more time, it's the hockeylawyer.com?
Yes.
And that's how people can find you.
That's the easiest way to remember my website.
Oh, I'm going to remember. I can remember it now, thehockeylawyer.com. So we got a couple more minutes, and I want to talk about a little bit more about hockey, and then talk a little bit more, one more legal topic. So on the hockey topic, how many championships have you won in that time in the Dan Melnick League?
I wouldn't even know. I mean,
you've lost count.
It's hundreds. Another attorney friend of mine, Robert Sheen, and I, who've been playing together since the 70s, sat down one time and tried to figure out how many games we've played over a lifetime, and it's far beyond 5,000. So.
And they're all complaining about LeBron James getting too many minutes. And is that, come on now? I mean, we got Dan Melnick here bringing the pain at.
Yeah, but my problem is, if I played 5,000 games, how come I'm not better?
Right. Well, they named the league after you, Dan. So yeah. I mean, you've got a division named after you. It's not what's the name of the trophy that you win in your? It's not the Dan Melnick Trophy, is it?
It's the Melnick Division Trophy.
You actually have the trophy named after you too.
Right.
So do you have a trophy case in your house with the Melnick Division trophies in there?
I do. I have a trophy case in my house.
And you also, you know what I noticed as well? You still have all of your teeth.
I do.
All of those fights and pucks to the face.
The remarkable thing is that I didn't even wear a helmet until I was in my 30s.
Does that helps explain sometimes some of the jokes that you tell me, though, I think. So, well, great. Well, I want to talk about one more legal topic since we are ostensibly a legal show. I want to talk about bail. So when you get in a fight in the hockey rink and it goes a little far and you're cracking somebody in the head with a giant hockey stick and you get arrested, unfortunately, they take you into custody and let's talk about bail. What is bail exactly?
Bail is actually a right that's guaranteed by the Constitution, so that the government can't just throw you in jail and keep you there as long as they want. Originally, bail was to guarantee that a person would come back to court.
Okay.
So the idea was, if we make it so expensive and so painful for this person to run, that will ensure that they return. Which is why, for example, murder can be no bail, because it's a capital crime, and you could get life, or back in those days you could be hung. So there's nothing at price that would be higher than that. So murder would be a no-bail crime. What's happened, though, over the years is that the courts have changed the requirements or the evaluation of bail where instead of just looking at a person's reliability to return to court, they also look at the seriousness of the crime. So nowadays, almost every case gets bail, and usually it's pretty high.
And I think people, I think people are really familiar with that. Where if the worse that the allegations are, always the higher bail. So if you're seeing something on TV and it's got a lot of notoriety, that itself sometimes can make something have a lot of bail.
That's correct.
And that also is that, I mean, in terms of, I know in your experience and in my experience, bail is always a concern because, my big thing is helping normal people to get into trouble. And so we want to try to make bail either what's called an OR release or as low as possible because normal people just can't scratch out a check for a $2 million bail or something like that.
Right. And
so,
we talked earlier about how things have changed. Things that people used to get ORs for, now they have a bail set.
And an OR is on your own recognizance.
Correct. It's a release without paying bail.
So that you basically, the judge says, I'm going to take your word that you're going to come back.
That's correct.
Absolutely. And so, well, I just, Dan, I really want to thank you for coming in today. Basically, it's you really are a Renaissance man. Everything with your hockey, thehockeylawyer.com.
That's it.
Now, I have a question for you. Do you carry one of the Melnick trophies around with you from time to time?
I actually used to have an ornament on the hood of my car.
Right on the front, right?
Right on the
Instead
front
of
there.
the old Jackie Gleason bullhorns that he used to have in Smokey and the Bandit, you've got the ornament on the front of your car.
We have a trophy we give out yearly called the Legend of Hockey.
And you win it every year? You just give it to yourself?
So Robert Sheehan gave it to me a few years back, and so that's a beautiful. You've seen it in my office.
I have, yes. Robert Sheehan, another legendary lawyer that maybe one day we'll be able to get into studio. So, well, Dan, again, I want to thank you so much for coming to join us today. You are one of my legal, if not the only legal mentor I have, and you're very knowledgeable, and I appreciate you helping us. This is Wade Skalsky. This is Wade Beyond the Courtroom. Stay safe this week, Santa Clarita, and we will talk soon.